Homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. The supreme Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered, even in millions of eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, may we all generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now, let's continue to study the words of my perfect teacher, the preliminary practice. As everyone knows, we are providing more extensive explanations this time, which is why the pace of the teaching is slower. But it is essential for you to also take the time to practice. I've seen that many people feel quite good during the process of practice, and the feedback is also positive. Of course, the practice of preliminary stages is different from some other tantric practices. Nowadays, many people like to practice tumo, fire puja, tsak offerings, or perform other rituals. Of course, this is also a part of tantric practice. If one has achieved the stages of generation and completion, performing these tantric practices has certain merits. However, it is best to first perfect the preliminary practices. During the preliminary practices, start with the common preliminaries, which I have repeatedly emphasized to everyone. Because if the foundation of the common preliminaries is not well established, then it is difficult to make progress with the uncommon preliminary practices. And if the extraordinary inner preliminaries are not properly practiced, then the much profounder realization of Tantra is very challenging to achieve. Therefore, many practitioners in Tibet, including some great scholars and accomplished beings, are indeed diligently practicing the common preliminaries. Some time ago, one of my former classmates, who is also a monk and now a Khenpo, visited me in the college. He has recently been studying the Dharma and seeking some teachings in Qinghai province. A few days ago, he came to my home and stayed for some time. During our conversations, he mentioned that in Golok Prefecture in Qinghai, there is a Lama named Tsultrim. Tsultrim Lama is now over 60 years old and has practiced the 5 preliminary practices 16 times in his life. The last time he practiced was at the age of 60. He said that other parts of the 5 uncommon preliminary practices were not difficult, only the prostrations were a bit challenging at the age of 60. Throughout his life, he has repeatedly practiced both the common and uncommon preliminary practices. He practiced them again and again every few years, and it is said that he even did not stop such practice during the Cultural Revolution. Tsultrim Lama is known in the local area as someone with very pure monastic discipline. He became a monk at a young age. Although there were many disturbances in Tibet, he never returned to lay life during those times. Every few years he secretly practiced the preliminaries again. In total, he has completed the preliminary practices from the common to the uncommon for 16 times. My classmate stayed in Qinghai for a long time and shared many stories about Tsultrim Lama. I was so glad and really rejoiced after hearing this. This also shows that such practitioners actually still exist in Tibet today. In fact, there are many of such dedicated practitioners. It is just that we are not aware of them. I hope this time, everyone can practice from the common preliminaries to the uncommon preliminaries thoroughly and perfectly. We shouldn't practice in a way that remains only in words or merely focuses on completing the required amounts superficially. Instead, for every guiding text, you must have a genuine feeling in your heart. Only with such genuine feeling or inspiration will you develop real motivation, and it will have a real effect. This time, the scope of our preliminary practices is quite extensive, with a large number of people involved. Of course, during this process, a few practitioners might give up halfway. This might happen. But I hope we, including myself, can all complete it this time. The reason why I make prostrations together with fellow practitioners every day is that such an opportunity is very rare. Nowadays, few people truly engage in virtuous actions themselves. Only very few would engage in actual practice. Just saying it or talking to others about the preliminary practices is not enough. Indeed, everyone should take the practice seriously, regardless of who they are. For me, I have not done the preliminary practices many times before. I've completed only once. And I mainly focused on completing the required amount, as at the time I had just become a monk. I did not meditate much on the common preliminaries back then either. But this time, I have thoroughly contemplated the common preliminaries as I give the lectures. And I genuinely developed a strong connection to the teachings, such as when discussing the rarity of obtaining a human body. I deeply believe that nothing is more important than engaging in virtuous actions after obtaining a human body. When it comes to the impermanence of life, every point of the teaching resonates with me, and I genuinely feel that the teachings are undeniably true. Although my expression may not be very eloquent when I give the lecture and I may not fully express my thoughts and insights to you, I do have a deep feeling in my heart when I read the text. And I also have a very sincere, a very pure faith in the lineage masters and all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Firstly, I hope that the practice will bring significant changes to everyone's life. And such practice should not only remain on a conceptual level. Secondly, I hope the practice will bring great benefits to everyone's future lives. This is my intention and motivation of giving the teachings this time, while guiding on the practice. During the practice, everyone can reflect on themselves that, in this diverse society, although we need to face so many things, the most important aspect of our life, I believe, is to practice the preliminaries well. During this process, any other superficial rituals or actions should be put aside as much as possible. Just keep focusing on the practice. Next, we discuss the fourth meditation of the impermanence of life, the impermanence of those in positions of power. We have learned before about the incomparable accomplishments of many noble ones, great masters, accomplished beings of this world, and even Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, who ultimately also manifest impermanence. There is no eternal existence. Now, turning to those who are renowned, wealthy, or powerful in the world, they too will eventually leave this world. None of them can live in the world permanently. Even the devas and rishi or sages who live for many kalpas, with perfect power and glory, cannot escape death. The great worldly lords like Brahma, Indra, the all-pervading ones, and Mahesvara, though they live for countless ages, with bodies reaching a yojana or krosa in height and radiance outshining even the sun and moon, they too cannot avoid death, as it is taught in the Treasury of Qualities. Even Brahma, Indra, Mahadvara, and the universal monarchs all have no way to evade the demon of death. This is clearly stated here. Worldly existence, whether in the celestial or human realms, all the great gods, worldly emperors, ministers, kings, presidents, or celestial beings and sages, some with lifespans lasting eons, grand stature, and complete virtues. Even magnificent beings like them cannot ultimately avoid death. All of them must inevitably face birth, aging, sickness, and death. When we were holding a ceremony the other day, one of the fellow practitioners said, "For people like us in Japan, Buddhism is truly much needed, because people in Japan also need to face birth, aging, sickness, and death." I strongly agree with him. As Buddhism is very much needed by everyone in today's world. Why do I say this? Let me put it this way. First and second grade courses in primary school are unnecessary for me now, as I've already graduated from primary school. Then I don't need to repeat kindergarten level education. Such knowledge is no longer relevant to me. Similarly, I don't necessarily need medical knowledge since I am not a doctor. However, the Dharma is necessary for everyone, because we all have to face birth, aging, sickness, and death. We all suffer within samsara. Therefore, just as every patient needs medicine, whether one is Japanese, Chinese, American, or even celestial beings or beings in hell, all need to break free from samsara. To do so, the Dharma is essential. This is why we really want the Dharma to be transmitted into every corner of the world and into every person's heart. Why is the Dharma necessary for everyone? You can ask yourself, does a president need the Dharma? Certainly, they do. Because they also face birth, aging, sickness, and death. They will suffer as well if they fall into lower realms in future lives. A beggar on the street needs the nectar of the Dharma in the same way. Therefore, theoretically, there is no sentient being that does not need the Dharma. Only some beings cannot directly receive the teachings of the Dharma. Such as when we look at certain animals, they need the Dharma, because their mind streams are filled with afflictions that need to be eradicated. Otherwise, they will experience intense suffering. But it is currently not feasible to directly impart Buddha's teachings in a way that they will understand. Returning to the text, as we discuss here, these great figures in the world cannot escape death either. For example, people who have studied the Abhidharmakosha Sastra would know that the lifespans of celestial beings like Indra, Brahma, Vishnu, and Isvara are exceedingly long compared to human lifespans. However, they will ultimately face death. Celestial beings also experience suffering when facing death. For example, it is recorded in the sutra that Indra, once using his clairvoyance, saw that he was about to fall into a lower realm. He saw a potter in the human realm. The potter had a jennet, that is an adult female donkey, and Indra saw that he was going to be reborn as the jennet's foal soon. Upon realizing this through his clairvoyance, Indra was extremely worried about what would happen. He then thought of the Buddha, as he is the only protector in the triple world, so Indra immediately went to the Buddha, taking refuge in his celestial form body. Then Indra's lifespan came to an end during the refuge ceremony in front of the Buddha. When he stood up after the ceremony, his consciousness had already left his body and instantly entered the body of the foal. At that time, the jennet suddenly started to jump around the potter's workshop, breaking his pottery, and the potter, infuriated, struck the jennet harshly with a whip. The whip hit the foal inside the jennet, causing it to die instantly. After dying, Indra's consciousness returned to the celestial realm, and he became Indra once again. The Buddha then said, "By taking refuge in the three jewels, with this merit, all sins are eradicated, and suffering will no longer be endured." The Buddha then gave some teachings on impermanence. Ultimately, Indra attained the fruition of stream enterer or sotapanna. Although Indra initially faced the suffering of impending death, at his final moment, just before dying, he transcended his suffering of being a foal through the merit of sincerely taking refuge in the three jewels. Therefore, ultimately, no celestial being in this world is immortal. There are sayings in the world today about Taoist immortality, and claims of sages who can live forever, etc. But in fact, these exist only temporarily and are viewed within a specific period of time. In reality, none can avoid death. For instance, celestial beings even possess their own intrinsic radiance, which surpasses the light of the sun and moon. But eventually, they will die. Thus, in the Treasury of Qualities it is also said, whether it be Brahma, Indra, or the universal monarchs, no being in this world is immortal. None can escape from the Mara of death. All will eventually die. All of us here, how many of us will still remain in this world in a few decades or 100 years from now? We can think about it carefully ourselves. Actually, death is not far off. We can say it's right in front of everyone. Although everyone clings to life and fears death, there's no way to avoid death. This is the inherent nature of impermanence. Now, the original text says, "In the end, Not even divine or human rishis with the 5 kinds of clairvoyance and the power to fly through the sky can escape death. The letter of consolation says, "Great rishis with their 5-fold powers can fly far and wide in the skies, yet they will never reach a land where immortality holds sway." This means that in this world, even gods or rishis who possess 5 kinds of clairvoyance lack the knowledge of the exhaustion of contaminations, such as the supernormal power of unimpeded bodily function, divine eyes, divine hearing, the ability to know the various rebirths of sentient beings and to read others' mind, will eventually die. We, as human beings, rely on our bodies to walk, while gods are not like that. They can freely roam through the sky or any part of the world, walking effortlessly through space, traveling in a carefree manner. However, no matter how much clairvoyance or magical powers they have, in the end, they too cannot avoid death. They cannot transcend the destiny of death. There is a legend in the Dhammapada that when the Buddha was in Rajgir, there were 4 Brahmin brothers who possessed 5 kinds of divine powers. In India, Brahmin is a commonly used term. It is sometimes used interchangeably with sage or to refer to someone who wishes to attain the celestial realm of Brahma. These 4 brothers surpassed everyone in the clairvoyance and magical powers they possessed. They could flip entire mountains into the sea and control the movement of the sun. Their divine powers and magical displays were incredibly impressive. As seen in the great biography of Buddha Shakyamuni, in the past, up to 500 sages, whether through cursing evilly or not, would fly together like swans in the sky, showing that their divine powers were truly unimaginable. At that time, these 4 brothers mentioned earlier were well versed in all kinds of worldly clairvoyance. But later, they observed through their divine powers that each of them had only 7 days left to live. They could live for just another 7 days. After discussing it together, they all agreed that, since we possess such great divine powers now, we should be able to avoid death in this world. One of them said, "I will hide in the ocean to escape death. I will neither float on the surface nor sink to the bottom, but remain in the middle of the ocean. The Mara of death cannot enter the ocean, so I will hide there using my divine powers." Another said, "I will use my powers to hide inside Mount Meru, where there are no gaps or openings." How could the Mara of death possibly reach inside Mount Meru? It's impossible. Another said, "I will travel freely through the space. The Mara of death cannot fly through space to chase me." The last one said, "I will hide in a bustling city, amidst the crowded and noisy throngs. The Mara of death cannot follow me there. With so many people around, I can weave through the crowds, and it surely will not find me." These 4 brothers devised 4 methods to avoid death, and each went their separate ways to hide. However, 7 days later, each of the Brahmin brothers had died. One died in the ocean, eaten by fish and other aquatic animals. One died in the sky, falling to the ground like withered leaves. One died inside Mount Meru, and another one died within the bustling city. In the end, all 4 of them could not escape death. Later, Shakyamuni Buddha said to his 4-fold disciples that these 4 Brahmin brothers were truly ignorant. No sentient being in this world can transcend death. Therefore, we must understand that it is impossible to avoid death at the end of one's life. When some patients, whose lives are nearing their end, wish desperately to live longer, they plead with doctors, officials, or many others, asking, "Can I live just a little longer?" That is absolutely impossible. Especially when one's lifespan is ending, no one can help. Not even Shakyamuni Buddha, who is considered unmatched in this world, could alter the natural law of death with all his powers. Some historical records mention that during the battle between the Shakya clan and King Virudhaka, due to past karmic causes, King Virudhaka's army slaughtered all the Shakya people. To demonstrate the inerrant principle of cause and effect, Shakyamuni Buddha hid 2 people among the Shakya clan in the ocean, moved 2 to the moon, and concealed another 2 inside a bowl through his miraculous power. Throughout the entire war, these 6 individuals remained unharmed at all. Nevertheless, after the fighting ended, these people all died naturally. Not one of them lived beyond their destined lifespan. This exemplifies how beings' own past karma works, and when their lifespan has ended, no one can intervene. Even if the Buddha or the medicine Buddha were to appear in front of us, they would still be unable to alter the outcome. Much less could a doctor in this world help. Some patients say, "Oh, you're an excellent traditional Chinese medicine doctor. Would you please take my pulse and check?" The doctor then feels your pulse, looks at your tongue, checks your eyes, and says, "Oh yes, yes, I see something here in your eyes." Then the doctor touches the area around the eyes and pinches the ear. Beyond that, the doctor has no further means to help. Some people believe as if the doctor of traditional Chinese medicine has divine powers. After examining a patient, the doctor might say, "Oh yes, yes, this patient's qi or vital energy is insufficient. The blood is insufficient." So, in the end, the patient died, indeed, due to the lack of qi and blood. So, there's no way out. Everyone must face death. Thus, during the process of our practice, we must reflect deeply and seriously on this principle. After such contemplation, we should clearly understand that, although there are millions of people in the world, actually anyone could understand the impermanence of life if they truly reflect on it. However, they rarely imagine it manifesting in their own lives. Because people have not deeply contemplated the impermanence of life, they are overwhelmed with heartbreak and pain when they witness death in hospitals or when their friends and relatives pass away. This is also why, when the Mara of death comes for someone, or for their friends and family, their faces turn pale, and they cry out in immense anguish. The reason is that we haven't deeply practiced and realized the impermanence of life. If we deeply understand such principle, when death occurs, whether it happens to ourselves or others, we would take it for granted and accept it as part of the natural law. We would handle it calmly and without so much pain. Therefore, we can say that those who have studied Mahayana Buddhism, especially those who have meditated on impermanence, are indeed courageous in the face of death. Those who lack a deep understanding of impermanence of life, no matter how vast their worldly knowledge may be, their inner strength diminishes when the Mara of death finally comes for them and they must leave this world. Their faces will turn pale and they go through all sorts of sadness and sorrow. Next, the original text says, "This is the same in the human world." Here in our human world there have been universal emperors who have reached the very pinnacle of power and material wealth. In the Holy Land of India, starting with Mahasamata, innumerable emperors ruled the entire continent. Later the 3 King Palace, the 37 Kandras and many other rich and powerful kings reigned in both eastern and western India. But now they have all gone and become a part of splendid history. For us, we may not be deeply versed in Indian history, but most people probably understand some basics. Since Buddhism originated in India, there are numerous historical records of various kings, ministers, and dynasties of India in Chinese or Tibetan texts. And many people may have read some of these records. In Tibet, there is a book called History of Buddhism in India, which is written by Taranatha. This book talks about how the Dharma flourished after Shakyamuni Buddha came to this world, including the history of the 2 supreme ones and the 6 ornaments. That entire period in India, with its political background and other circumstances, are all clearly stated. Many figures appeared in India as described in the scriptures, such as universal monarchs, and later, King Mahasamata reigned. According to the well-known Tibetan history book, the Red Annals, the earliest king of humanity could be traced back to Mahasamata of India. At the very beginning, humans had no sense of personal ownership or attachment. Everyone shared everything together. Every being's body possessed intrinsic radiance, and there was no need to divide properties. But later, as beings' merit gradually waned, properties needed to be divided, and distinctions between male and female appearances arose, and the spaces inside homes and dwellings were separated. During this time, many conflicts arose between people. Later, they decided to hold what could be seen as a form of democratic election today. Modern democracy is said to be originated from Mahasamata's time, that the first king in human history was elected through democratic process. He was called Mahasamata, literally meaning the one respected by everyone, because he was the most esteemed. A king becomes a king because the majority respect him. Mahasamata received everyone's praise, which led to his ascension to the throne. His descendants included King Suddhodana, who is Shakyamuni Buddha's father. Therefore, we can see how the throne passed down from Mahasamata initially. And there were other kings renowned in India, such as those of the Pala Empire, the three Palas, which are the Gopala Pala, Deva Pala, and Rajya Pala, among others. These are frequently mentioned in the Red Annals and other historical books. Additionally, there are 37 rulers in Kandra's dynasty, including notable figures such as Harikandra and Jayakandra. In total, there were 37 generations of Kandra's kings. Numerous powerful kings reigned in both eastern and western India. Yet, we now know they have all passed, and the entire monarchy system in India ended long ago. In later course of history, many humanitarians, such as Gandhi, emerged. And other famous figures kept appearing, but they too have all passed away. Therefore, it is easy to understand from the entire history of Indian kings that everything is impermanent. Then, in our snow-covered land, Tibet's history, because the author is Tibetan, so from the perspective of the Tibetan history, the original text says, in Tibet, the land of snows, the first king, Nyatri Tsenpo, was of divine descent, an emanation of the Bodhisattva Sarvanivarana Viskambin. Then reigned the 7 celestial kings called Tri, the 6 noble earth kings called Lek, the 8 middle kings called De, the 5 linking kings called Tsen, the 13 generations of fortune, sometimes referred to as the 12.5 kings, and the 5 generations of great joy. None of them exist now. Here is a brief account of Tibet's kings and ministers. In the land of snows, many kings were indeed emanations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The first king, Nyatri Tsenpo, was an emanation of the Bodhisattva Sarvanivarana Viskambin. Nyatri Tsenpo, also known in Chinese as the king of the throne on the shoulders. He belonged to the Mahasamata lineage. Nyatri Tsenpo's body was unique, with hands and feet like a swan's webbed feet. When he was a child, he wandered into Tibet because the Indians regarded his body as a bad omen and sent him away. Upon arriving in Tibet, many Tibetan herdsmen met him in the region north of present-day Lhasa. The herdsman asked Nyatri Tsenpo, "Where did you come from?" He answered by pointing his finger up toward the sky. People then believed he was from heaven and he should be a celestial being. As a result, they treated him with respect, carried him on their shoulders, and enthroned him as king, earning him the title, the king of the throne on the shoulders. Nyatri Tsenpo therefore became the first king of Tibet. Then appeared the other kings in the 7 heavenly kings called Tri, which includes Nyatri Tsenpo, Mutri Tsenpo, Dingtri Tsenpo, etc. We used to recite their names a lot. Especially when I was studying in normal college, I was particularly interested in Tibetan history. Sometimes, when the teacher was giving us Chinese or music lessons, I would be reading many history books secretly and started to memorize these kings' names. The 7 heavenly kings called Tri. Why are they called this name? This is because after these kings' deaths, their tombs were constructed in the sky. This implies that these kings, starting with the first of the 7 heavenly kings called Tri, all attained rainbow body and did not need physical tombs anymore. Thus, people believed that celestial beings had welcomed them. Nowadays, some people also say that Tibet was also originally a place of belief in God. Such sayings exist, and there's no need to argue about it. Recently, an American came to Beijing, and while taking the subway in Beijing, he asked some people around whether they believed in God. When some Chinese said that there is no God, he got very angry, saying, "How can you not believe in God? That's as foolish as an animal." He was extremely upset at that time, shouting, "God should be acknowledged. If you don't believe in God, what kind of person are you?" Anyways, back then in Tibet, during the time of the 7 heavenly trees, it was believed that the kings directly go up to heaven after death. Such beliefs existed. Then came the 6 earthly kings called Lek. There are differing historical accounts of this, but according to Patrul Rinpoche's teachings, the final tombs of the 6 earthly kings called Lek were built between rocky and grassy mountains. This is why they are called the 6 earthly kings. The 8 middle kings called Di had their tombs built mainly underwater, which is how their name originated. The tombs of the 5 linking kings called Sen were on mountaintops or within the king's domain in the country. After this, the 12.5 kings of the Fortunate Dynasty began, starting from King La Thothori Nyensen. We learned before that during La Thothori Nyensen's time, representatives of the 3 jewels such as the 6-syllable mantra, Jewel Chest Sutra, and stupas appeared above his palace. A prophecy foretold that 5 generations later, the significance of these symbols would be fully understood. After another 5 generations, Songtsen Gampo was born. In total, there were 12.5 kings of the Fortunate Dynasty from La Thothori Nyensen to Tri Rinpoche. Buddhism was more prosperous during that time compared to earlier periods, which is why it is referred to as the 12.5 kings of the Fortunate Dynasty. As mentioned earlier, during the reign of King Songtsen Gampo, he married 2 princesses, acquired a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha, and received many other representatives of the 3 jewels' blessings. He also established language in Tibet. His minister, Gartongtsen, who was an emanation of Vajrapani, traveled to Han China, significantly progressing diplomatic relations in various aspects. These are also the reason why this period of time is called the 12.5 kings of the Fortunate Dynasty. Afterwards, the period from King Trisong Detsen to Tri Rinpoche is called the 5 of the Extremely Fortunate Dynasty. Starting from the reign of King Trisong Detsen, he invited the incomparable Padmasambhava and Shantarakshita to Tibet. He also translated the Tripitaka and many other commentaries, established the first monastery in Tibet, Sami. After doing these, Buddhism flourished greatly. Especially during King Tri Rinpoche's time, he usually tied his hair into 2 parts and would lay his hair on the ground, allowing one side for tantric yogis, ngagpas, to pass over. This showed great respect to the monastic community. He would also lay the other side of his hair on the ground for the monastic community to pass over. Therefore, King Tri Rinpoche's respect and contribution to Buddhism were indeed very significant. Many kings and ministers like him have come to this world, but now, as everyone would understand that except for historical records, they no longer exist. Here the text discusses that, in the reign of Dharma King Songtsen Gampo, who was the emanation of Avalokiteshvara, by using a conjured army, he subdued all lands from Nepal to China. Many historical sources cite, especially the Red Annals, the Blue Annals, and the White Annals, recorded clearly that during King Songtsen Gampo's time, his power was immense. We can know this from many historical resources. However, today we will not analyze how the territory was structured or governed during that period of time in detail here. This is a sensitive topic, so I will refrain from discussing it, especially this year. Our main focus here is on reflecting upon the impermanence. King Trisong Detsen, who was the emanation of Manjushri, brought 2/3 of Jambudvipa under his power. There are many reliable historical records of this, particularly those by Gendun Chöpel, whose research was very accurate. Although Gendun Chöpel did not live long and entered parinirvana in his 50s, his historical research is very much recognized internationally even now. He was a historian of great wisdom. During the reign of King Tri Ralpash, an iron pillar was erected on the banks of the Ganges, marking the frontier between India and Tibet. Later, when the translator Cheljungna Gyaltsen traveled to India, they spent the night there, as mentioned by Gendun Chöpel in his travelogue Journey to Countries. Gendun Chöpel wrote, Cheljungna Gyaltsen stayed by the iron pillar at the Ganges. There was a pillar there. The next day, Gendun Chöpel left Tibetan territory and crossed the Ganges into India. From Gendun Chöpel's travelogue, we can see that during that time, Tibetan territory extended to the Ganges. When we visited India, we asked, where exactly is this pillar? But the Ganges is vast, and we couldn't find it. Gendun Chöpel also mentioned this during his research and recorded in his book, The Records of Indian Holy Mountains. Additionally, the text says here, Tibet brought many regions under its power, including India, China, Bazaar, Tajikistan, and other countries. This substantially depicts the relationship between Tibet and its surrounding region. If you're willing to open up the history books, it clearly shows the territory of Tibet and the neighboring countries' interactions with Tibet during that time, especially under King Tri Ralpach. Such relationship and connections can also be revealed through some Tibetan masters' journey of spreading the Dharma. During the New Year celebrations in Lhasa, ambassadors from all these countries were required to attend for one day to present tributes and participate in ceremonies. This demonstrates the considerable influence Tibet held over neighboring regions during that period. The brief explanations provided here describe how the Tibetan kings governed the vast territories at that time. However, in the end, all of them eventually passed away. I think it is the same way for Han China's history. Throughout all the dynasties, from the dynasty of Xia, Shang, Zhou, Qin, three kingdoms, Jin, northern and southern dynasties, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, to the Qing dynasty, each king or emperor was incredibly powerful during their times. Especially in Han China's history, it is very hard for ordinary people to imagine the great power and influence of some figures such as Emperor Qin Shi Huang, Emperor Wu of Han, Emperor Taizong of Tangli Shimin, Emperor Taizu of Song, and Emperor Kangxi. But all of that is gone. Many generations of national leaders since Qing dynasty have come and gone as well. We can clearly see from these examples that it is indeed impermanent. Let's not talk about these significant figures. Even among the fellow practitioners here, some of the older ones, look at your villages and family changes. How have they evolved? You should know it. Additionally, we have studied much history, geography, and astronomy. Then from the perspective of these scientific figures in history, for example, scientists like Einstein and Newton in physics, they have only appeared briefly in this world from historical records, and none of them are still alive now. Other figures like Kai Lun, who invented paper, astronomer Zhang Heng, mathematicians like Zhu Chongji, and pharmacologists like Zhang Zhongjing, we used to read about them and their achievements in textbooks. But besides that, these figures have all passed away. In the same way, there are geographers like Li Daoyuan, agronomists like Jia Sixi, and many others. Although they once lived in the world, they have all departed from this life. We can see through their achievements, their deeds and biographies that it is indeed impermanent. Furthermore, we, including the people in our own families, many from the older generation have now been entirely replaced. Sometimes I think, when I was very young, in my father's generation, people used to refer to them as the head of a family. A few years ago, people of my age were referred to in the same way. Now, when I go back to my village, it seems that people of my age are already obsolete, and those younger than my generation have become the heads of households. So, they have all been replaced generation after generation. Just like flowers blooming and fading, impermanence is right in front of us. Nevertheless, whether it's the change of seasons or the shifting of day and night around us, we witness constant movement every day and every second. We still cling to a very stubborn mindset called the permanent mindset. The permanent mindset fails to truly understand the reality of impermanence. And this is the confusion and ignorance of us sentient beings. Therefore, during our meditation, we must cultivate a sincere conviction in the principle of impermanence. This is why the Kadampa tradition and many great masters of Tibetan Buddhism believe that if the contemplation of impermanence is well practiced, all other practices can be accomplished with excellence. Now the original text says, "Such was Tibet's power in the past. Despite its once mighty power, all of this has now become mere historical record. Nothing remains of their glory except what we find in books and historical accounts. The figures that remain are merely words. Eventually, even the words will not remain. We who are sitting here, in a few hundred years, some of us may have a little bit of written history. Some of us will have no records at all. It's just like when an ant dies, who would write the ant's biography? Indeed, sometimes we are quite pitiful. Reflect on those past splendors. So all that we possess now, our homes, possessions, companions, and power, which we consider so impressive, when compared to those great beings of the past, are as insignificant as a beehive. Indeed, when we consider the abilities, wisdom, and great contributions to society of all these kings, ministers, or sages that we discussed earlier, and compare them to us, yet we still find ourselves thinking, "Oh, my house looks so nice. Look, I've built a house with sturdy walls. How nice it looks." Then, hang many photos of Buddha inside the house. Some lay practitioners feel as if they have constructed a Potala palace after decorating their houses, being really happy and satisfactory. However, these are neither sturdy nor important. Just like bees are joyful after building their hive, whereas, after one summer, when winter comes, their fate is that they have to leave. It is also said in the Buddhist scriptures that, alas, all the compounded phenomena, their nature is impermanent, which means the nature of compounded or conditioned things is inherently impermanent. Then, once born, death follows, like a shadow follows a person. This demonstrates that when one is born, death always follows like a shadow. All wise individuals must understand profoundly the principle of impermanence of life. Otherwise, generally speaking, people do not have a strong awareness of impermanence. Some, perhaps due to good past life karma, may have a well-developed sense of impermanence from a young age. Last night, I was unwell and couldn't sleep. So, I opened the book, Biographies of Eminent Masters of Song Dynasty, and read the story about Zen Master Jigxuan. Master Jigxuan later became very accomplished and lived to be 73 years old. He made great contributions to Han Chinese Buddhism. From a young age, He had cultivated a deep awareness of impermanence. When he was about 5 years old, his grandfather asked him to write a poem, and he wrote, "The flowers bloom, painting the whole tree red. The flowers fall, leaving the branches bare. Only one bud remains. Tomorrow it too will fall with the wind." What does it mean? He wants to express that when the flowers bloom, the entire tree is covered in brilliant red, vivid and beautiful. However, when the flowers fall, all the branches are left bare. Every flower drops at the time of falling. There may be one flower that still clings on, yet to fall entirely. Nevertheless, this flower's fate is the same, that it will also fall with the wind tomorrow. There is nothing reliable. Therefore, from an extended meaning of this poem, everyone here now appears to be thriving, all living in the world. But when death and impermanence arrive, everyone ultimately dies. At that time, perhaps 1 or 2 individuals may remain alive, while their fate will soon lead them to leave the world as well, and nothing is permanent. So, sometimes when you read these books, you can see that the practice of these great masters is indeed admirable. There was also another Zen master called Ling Yu, who entered parinirvana at the age of 88. Master Ling Yu lived in the Sui dynasty. Emperor Wen of the Sui dynasty greatly respected him and invited him to the court to be the master of the empire. But he consistently refused, unwilling to live among worldly people. Later, the king tried every possible means, sending him wealth to help build temples. Of course, Master Ling Yu acted on a vast scale for the benefit of beings and the teachings at that time. When it was very close to his parinirvana, he said, "Today I sit on a high throne. Tomorrow I lie among thorns. A life barely lived. What will come to an end?" What does this mean? It means, today I sit on a high Dharma throne, but after I die, I might lie among piercing thorns, which is possibly referred to the 3 lower realms. He meant that his work in this life is over, but it's hard to say what happens next. After leaving this verse, he passed away 7 days later. Through these stories, if every fellow practitioner can deeply engrave this sense of impermanence within their heart, then your practice will become much easier. These great monks and masters spent their whole lives only contemplating the Dharma. They did not seek fame, profit, or anything else. They just practiced diligently. But many practitioners nowadays are not like this. A lot of people are deeply attached to worldly things. They say they practice the Dharma, but that's just lip service, while in reality, they often cannot leave the temptations of the world. So, when reading the biographies of some great masters in Han China, one can truly develop a lot of faith. This also includes the stories of many great Tertans, tantric yogis and Tibetan practitioners in the book The Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism, its fundamentals and history. Look at how did those practitioners live, and how do we live now? In fact, no matter we are lay practitioners or monastics, we all have the same human body, but the way we live and practice is different. There was also a great monk from Han China named Zen Master Chengguan, who spent his whole life spreading the Dharma, giving teachings, and was extremely diligent. During his life, he made 10 vows. The first vow, he said that, except for my 3 robes, I will not keep any possessions in my quarters. Apart from my 3 robes and the sutra text of the 3 jewels, I live purely as one would in Thailand, keeping no money whatsoever. Master Chengguan's second vow is, fame and fortune should be discarded like snivel, which means he will discard all fame and profit. The third vow, i.e., as he was a celibate monk, he said, eyes shall not look at women. To maintain pure precepts, he did not look at any woman's actions. His fourth vow was that he never visited a lay household. He would not go to any lay people's house. No matter how hungry or desperate he was, he would not go. His fifth vow was to recite the Lotus Sutra for the long term. The sixth vow was to continuously read and recite Mahayana scriptures. His seventh vow was to regularly give lectures on the Avatamsaka Sutra. He gave teachings on the Avatamsaka Sutra many times in his life. His eighth vow was to never lie down, day or night, to refrain from sleeping. The ninth vow was to refrain from deception. He vowed never to deceive anyone, no matter in which means. That is to say, he would not deceive any being for the sake of fame. He refused to lie to any sentient being in pursuit of fame or profit. And another one, he vowed never to retreat from compassion and lose the bodhicitta. So far, I have mentioned 9 vows. Perhaps I have forgotten one. Have I stated the 10th? Right. He also vowed never to lose compassion and the bodhicitta. After reading this, I reflect on myself. Staying awake day and night, never sleeping. I cannot do that. Avoiding contact with money except for the 3 robes. I cannot do that either. Disregarding all fame and profit, etc. It seems very difficult to achieve all of these. Therefore, comparing practitioners nowadays with those of the past, there is a significant difference in the power of the mind, and we should feel quite embarrassed. Even so, we still need to have faith and confidence and strive to learn. I believe that all worldly pursuits, except for genuinely practicing the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings, have no real meaning. I am deeply convinced of this. Whether it's fame or profit, no worldly thing is reliable. The only true meaning is to vow to wholeheartedly use the Dharma to benefit sentient beings. When you have time, you should diligently practice profound teachings focusing on impermanence. You should think this way. Meditate deeply and ask yourself, how could you think that those things would last forever and never make any changes? They won't last at all. Therefore, we must reflect deeply and contemplate the teachings above. We must think deeply. These teachings will not integrate into your heart without contemplation. In Gendun Chöpel's advice on the practice of the essential sacred Dharma, he also stated that the impermanent body has not the slightest substance. Therefore, we must diligently cultivate the sublime teachings. This means that our current body has no permanence, substance, or reliability at all. Thus, we must rely on this body to practice the deepest and most profound Dharma teachings with great diligence from now on. This is rather crucial for every Dharma practitioner. We also need to frequently pray to the 3 jewels and our Guru. Pray that, may the realization of impermanence may quickly arise within our mind stream. Because when impermanence arises, you will lose interest in worldly things. While regarding Dharma practice, no one will need to check on you, saying, "Hey, you need to practice. Why aren't you practicing? If you don't practice, I'll punish or fine you." There's no need to do that. You will practice automatically without anyone urging you. Some lay practitioners outside are dependent on their Vajra friends' reminders. Can you attend the class? Don't skip it. Listen carefully. If the power of impermanence is within your heart, attending the teachings happens naturally. There's no need for Vajra friends to call you anymore. One will feel that worldly things are not important. Listening to and studying Dharma teachings are the most significant things in one's life. Otherwise, if we lack the view of impermanence, then we will be like particularly mischievous children every day, whom parents must always remind us to behave. No matter how much we remind ourselves, it's sometimes hard to change. Therefore, we should first cultivate a convinced understanding of impermanence among all other practices. Then the transformation becomes much easier and more natural, since you will be self-motivated to study and practice. All right, we'll end here today.